There is a very powerful energy surrounding this message, and I need you to pay close attention to the feeling that comes up inside you as you hear this. Because someone out there truly underestimated you. They misjudged your silence. They misread your patience. They thought your kindness meant that you would always stay, always forgive, always come back no matter how they behaved. But something shifted. Something inside you changed in a way they never expected. And now the energy around them feels heavy, almost like a realization that came too late. Before we go any deeper into this message, I want to remind you of something very important. Only take what resonates with you and leave the rest behind, because this message will not belong to everyone. But for the one who needs to hear it, it will feel almost undeniable. The energy here feels like someone who once believed they had control over the situation. They believed that no matter what they did, you would still be there. Maybe they thought you were too understanding, too forgiving, or too emotionally attached to ever truly walk away. And because of that belief, they allowed themselves to behave carelessly. They crossed boundaries. They ignored your feelings. They may have even taken your presence for granted. But what they never stopped to consider was that patience has a limit, and respect is something that must be protected. What is very interesting about the energy coming through this reading is that your silence may have shocked them more than any argument ever could. Sometimes people expect confrontation. They expect emotional reactions. They expect you to chase them, question them, or fight to keep them around. But when someone simply decides they have had enough and walks away quietly, it creates a kind of emptiness that is very difficult to ignore. And that is exactly the feeling I am sensing here. There is someone who suddenly realized that your absence is not temporary. Your distance is not a phase. You meant what you showed through your actions. For some of you, this person may have thought they could come back whenever they wanted. They believed the door would always remain slightly open for them. Maybe they thought time would erase everything. Maybe they assumed that eventually you would miss them enough to reach out first. But something about your energy now feels different. It feels stronger, calmer, more self-aware. It feels like someone who has reached a point where they finally understand their own worth. And when that kind of realization happens, it changes everything. Because people who once thought they could play with your emotions suddenly realize that they misread the situation completely. The moment you stopped explaining yourself, the moment you stopped chasing closure, the moment you decided that your peace mattered more than their approval, the entire dynamic shifted. What I am feeling here is the energy of someone looking back at the situation now and realizing that they pushed too far. They assumed you would tolerate things that you eventually refused to accept. They believed you would remain emotionally available no matter how they treated you. But instead, they were met with a version of you that they were not prepared for. A version of you that knows when to walk away. And that realization has created a very strong emotional ripple. Because sometimes the moment people truly understand the value of someone is the exact moment that person has already chosen to move forward without them. As we move deeper into this reading, the energy begins to reveal a story that is much bigger than just a simple disagreement or a temporary separation. What is unfolding here feels like a journey of realization, both for you and for the person who underestimated you. Because the truth is, when someone underestimates your ability to walk away, it usually means they never fully understood your strength in the first place. They saw your kindness, your patience, your willingness to understand, and they interpreted it as something permanent. They assumed that no matter what they did, no matter how far they pushed things, you would always remain within reach. But the first card that came forward in this reading is the Queen of Swords, and this energy immediately sets the tone for everything that follows. The Queen of Swords represents clarity that comes after emotional trials. This is not someone who became strong overnight. This is someone who became strong through experience, through moments where they had to confront uncomfortable truths about people, relationships, and even themselves. The Queen of Swords is someone who has learned to see beyond charming words and empty promises. She recognizes patterns. She understands intentions, and most importantly, she respects herself enough to walk away when something no longer feels right. Your energy in this situation reflects that exact transformation. At one point, you may have tried to give this person the benefit of the doubt. You may have tried to understand their behavior, excuse their actions, or believe that things would improve with time. Many of you may have even questioned yourselves, wondering if you were expecting too much, wondering if you were being too sensitive, wondering if you should simply be more patient. But what the Queen of Swords teaches is that clarity eventually arrives. There comes a moment where confusion fades and truth becomes impossible to ignore. And when that moment came for you, it changed everything. You began to see the situation for what it truly was, not for what you hoped it could become. And that shift in awareness quietly began to change your behavior. You stopped over-explaining your feelings. You stopped trying to fix things that were never yours to fix. You stopped chasing understanding from someone who was not making the effort to meet you halfway. Instead, you began observing. You began protecting your energy. You began realizing that your peace was more valuable than trying to maintain a connection that constantly left you feeling uncertain. And this is where the second card becomes incredibly significant. The Eight of Cups appeared next, and this card carries the energy of emotional departure. It represents the moment someone realizes that staying in a situation will only continue draining their spirit. What makes the Eight of Cups powerful is that the person walking away is not leaving something meaningless. They are leaving something that once held emotional weight. They are leaving something they once cared about deeply. This decision was not easy for you. It did not happen suddenly. It was likely the result of many moments where you felt unheard, unseen, or taken for granted. Each time something happened, a small piece of your emotional investment began to fade. Each disappointment slowly chipped away at the hope that things would change. But the person on the other side of this situation may not have realized what was happening. They may have believed that the dynamic between you would remain the same no matter what. They may have thought that your patience was unlimited. Some people grow comfortable in situations where they feel secure that the other person will never truly leave. And that is exactly where the misunderstanding happened. Because when someone believes you will always stay, they sometimes stop treating you with the care and respect you deserve. They become careless with your emotions. They assume you will forgive behavior that should never have been tolerated in the first place. The third card appearing here is the Five of Swords, and this card reflects the tension that may have existed between you and this person before everything changed. The Five of Swords often represents ego battles, situations where one person tries to maintain control or superiority in the connection. There may have been moments where this person tried to twist situations, avoid accountability, or make you feel as if your concerns were exaggerated. For some of you, there may have been emotional mind games involved. Situations where you felt confused about where you stood. Moments where you questioned whether your feelings were valid. And the difficult part about these dynamics is that they slowly wear down a person's emotional clarity. But eventually, clarity returned. And once it did, the entire dynamic shifted. Because the moment you stopped engaging in those patterns, the moment you stopped reacting the way they expected you to react, something changed. They may not have noticed it immediately, but your energy had already begun pulling away. Now the fourth card appearing here is the King of Cups, and this card gives us insight into the emotional state of the person who underestimated you. The King of Cups represents someone with deep emotions, but also someone who may struggle to express those emotions openly. On the outside, they may appear calm, composed, even unaffected by the situation, but internally, there are feelings that they are trying to process. This person did not expect your silence to carry so much weight. They may have thought that after some time passed, you would eventually reach out again. They may have assumed that the connection between you was strong enough that things would naturally return to normal. But what they did not anticipate was that your silence would continue. And the longer that silence lasted, the more uncomfortable the realization became. There may have been moments where they tried to convince themselves that you were just taking space, that you were simply upset for the moment, that eventually things would go back to the way they were before. But as time continued moving forward, the truth became harder to ignore. Your absence started to feel permanent. Your distance began to feel intentional. And that realization began stirring emotions that they had not prepared themselves to face. This is where the fifth card arrives with powerful energy. The Tower appears in this reading, and the Tower represents sudden awakenings, moments where reality can no longer be avoided. The Tower is not always comfortable, but it is always honest. It forces people to see the consequences of their choices, often in a way that feels overwhelming. For this person, there may have been a moment where everything finally clicked. A moment where they realized that you were not coming back in the same way they expected. It could have been triggered by something simple. Maybe they saw you moving forward with your life. Maybe they noticed that you no longer reacted to their presence the way you once did. Or maybe it was simply a quiet moment where they reflected on everything that happened between you. And in that moment, the realization arrived. They pushed too far. They assumed too much. They underestimated someone who had the strength to walk away. The Tower energy often brings regret because it exposes truths that were previously ignored. It forces someone to look at the past and recognize the role they played in creating the outcome they are now experiencing. And for many of you listening to this message, that realization may now be unfolding on the other side of this situation. But what is most important in this reading is the energy surrounding you now. Because the final card appearing here is the Six of Wands, and this card carries the vibration of personal victory. But this victory is not about proving anything to the person who underestimated you. It is not about revenge or making them feel the same pain you experienced. The Six of Wands represents something much more meaningful. It represents self-respect. It represents the quiet confidence that comes from choosing your own peace. When you walked away, you may have felt uncertainty at first. You may have wondered if you made the right decision. You may have questioned whether things could have been different if you tried one more time. But the energy surrounding you now feels stronger. It feels balanced. It feels like someone who has reconnected with their own sense of worth. You are no longer chasing clarity from someone who could not provide it. You are no longer waiting for someone to treat you the way you deserve to be treated from the beginning. Instead, you are standing in your own truth. And what makes this transformation so powerful is that people often recognize someone's value most clearly when that person is no longer within reach. The moment you stopped explaining yourself, the moment you stopped trying to prove your intentions, the moment you chose silence over emotional exhaustion, the entire dynamic changed. Because silence carries a message that words sometimes cannot express. It says that you have reached a place where your peace matters more than maintaining a connection that no longer aligns with your spirit. And that realization, both for you and for the person who underestimated you, is what this entire reading is truly about. You discovered your strength, and now someone else is realizing it too. But the difference is that you discovered it in time to protect yourself, and they are discovering it after the opportunity to appreciate it has already slipped through their hands. As we come to the end of this reading, the energy surrounding you feels very different from where this story once began. What started as confusion, emotional tension, and unanswered questions has slowly transformed into something much clearer. The message that keeps repeating itself through this entire reading is simple but powerful. You finally chose yourself, and that choice changed everything. There was a time when you may have waited for this person to understand you. You may have hoped that they would eventually recognize your value, respect your boundaries, or appreciate the love and patience you were offering. Many of you gave more chances than you probably should have. You tried to communicate. You tried to remain open-hearted. You tried to believe that the connection meant enough for things to improve. But sometimes the most important realization in life is understanding that you cannot force someone to see your worth. You cannot convince someone to treat you with respect if they have already decided not to. And the moment you truly understand that, something inside you shifts. You stop chasing explanations. You stop trying to prove your intentions. You stop fighting battles that were never meant for you to fight. Instead, you begin protecting your peace. And that is exactly what happened here. The person who underestimated you believed your kindness would always keep you within reach. They believed your patience meant permanence. They thought you would continue tolerating situations that slowly drained your spirit. But what they never expected was that one day you would simply reach your limit and walk away without looking back. Your silence became your final answer. And sometimes silence is the loudest message a person can send. Because when someone realizes that you are no longer reacting the way you used to, no longer explaining yourself, no longer giving them access to your energy, it forces them to face a truth they tried to ignore for a long time. Your absence begins to speak where your words once did. For some of you, this person may now be reflecting deeply on everything that happened between you. They may be replaying conversations in their mind, remembering moments where they could have treated you better, moments where they could have chosen honesty, respect, or emotional maturity. Regret has a way of appearing when someone finally understands what they lost. But this reading is not really about their regret. It is about your transformation. You reached a point where your self-respect became stronger than your attachment to a situation that was no longer healthy for you. And that kind of growth is not easy. Walking away from something you once cared about requires courage. It requires emotional strength. It requires trusting yourself enough to believe that your peace matters. And that is exactly the energy you are carrying now. You are no longer the person who waits for validation from someone who could not see your value. You are no longer trying to hold together something that required two people, but was only being carried by one. Instead, you are moving forward with a new understanding of yourself. Your energy now feels grounded, calm, clear. It feels like someone who has learned an important lesson about boundaries, respect, and emotional balance. And what is beautiful about this energy is that it naturally attracts better experiences into your life. Because when you stop accepting less than you deserve, the universe begins aligning you with situations and people who recognize your worth without needing to be convinced. So if this message found you today, take a moment to acknowledge how far you have come. The strength it took for you to walk away did not go unnoticed. Your decision to protect your peace has created space for something better, something more aligned with who you truly are now. And sometimes the most powerful chapter of your story begins the moment you close the door on the one that was never meant to last. Thank you for being here and sharing this moment of reflection. If this message resonated with you, trust that it arrived exactly when you needed to hear it. And remember, the energy you carry moving forward will continue shaping the next chapter of your journey in ways you may not even see yet.